All right, let's resume. We just got finished going through our data, and then we referenced many times our school board accountability plan and also our ability to follow and track our data, our measures, how we're performing. I guess it was last Friday, give Dr. Bailey and I think I saw Ms. LeGrand and Mr. Butts. They came in on Friday and asked me to join them, and then as punishment, when I got here, the elevators were being serviced, so we all ended up walking up 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stories just to come and make sure that the students of Norfolk Public Schools are well served. So Dr. Bailey and I had an opportunity to, we said the money.
World's tiniest violin.
The only thing I'm upset about is when I went and looked at my steps that Dr. Boone had me looking at, it didn't even record on my steps. I'm like,
Well, that was
I was
your
just
fault.
frustrated.
You should have gotten a lot of steps.
I know.
Done it again.
As warm as it is in here, we all may be going down steps in a minute. But Dr. Bailey, we looked at the accountability plan. As you know, Ms. Bassina and I have been working kind of as an ad hoc committee with Dr. Bailey and Mr. Footy on just trying to make sure that we continue to bring back the discussions we've had at the board is about the accountability plan. There was a version of the plan that they had worked on that continued to consolidate the plan. I just want to kind of talk through this because we got a version back in April, and that's the version that's there before you on board docs. And I struggled a little bit with that version because we took out the benchmark and target column. And so when we just went through this academic data and we talked about the 2 years, in my mind, part of what would end up being placed in that benchmark target data column would be the results of this information. And so we would continue to see that information. And then at this stage of the game, that the accountability plan was really something that the board put together for us to monitor our work as we had conversations around, how does a school board impact student achievement? And in my conversation with Dr. Bailey, I think part of what came to light for me is that from a staff perspective, they would look at the same chart and then begin to see it almost as a staff document. And so I just want to kind of say that where we are right now is really a board document that helps and guides us in our discussions. It does identify strategies. When we talk about our calendars and our work sessions and the things that we discuss in our training, these strategies here are intended to kind of talk about really the board and the governance team, the types of things that we would do like we just did today, that the board asks that we take more time and try to make sure that our presentations that we request of the staff align with the discussions that we're having, that our agendas, I think Dr. Gabriel mentioned earlier that we try to make sure that our meetings give more focus to student achievement. Some of that evolved out of the Council of Great City Schools report. Sometimes if a person picks this up and you go straight across, one can easily think that it aligns by rows, but I think as a board we know that it doesn't. So I just wanted to go back and first kind of revisit where we are with the version that has the 5 columns, just kind of refresh and have a governance team conversation around how this is serving us in our work. And then Dr. Bailey and Mr. Footy will come up and they'll give some more perspective on the plan as we have it. As you know, they've been working on a dashboard, actual technology-based dashboard that allows us to begin to see electronically some of the information that we just received there. But in any event, as we continue to move forward, I just wanted to put that out there because I think one of the examples that Dr. Bailey and I had a conversation was around the percentage of schools that are fully accredited. And so if you think about it from, I guess, an administration's perspective, you know, the teachers in the classroom, it's where the rubber hits the road. You have the principals that are doing the support. You have all the central administration, all the things that we just talked about. So, you know, what role does the school board have in terms of actually impacting that outcome? I think we have a big impact because if we're not doing some of the things we just did earlier, paying attention, asking questions, is the curriculum aligned, some of the things that we've talked about that we've seen in the recent times, that if we aren't giving attention and asking those types of questions, things can easily slip by us. Or, you know, I think sometimes in the questions that we ask, it also brings some things forward to the administration in terms of not only what the board is looking at, but I think all of us benefit from when we, you know, get input into the process. So I really don't want to go much more into that at this point, but I just wanted to bring that forward and just to get a sense from the governance team perspective, how you all are feeling so far. This is serving us. We know we're going to make adjustments. We know we have data, as Dr. Boone just mentioned as we concluded the earlier presentation, that there's information that will come from the final results that will help populate this chart. Hopefully, as we talk about our goals and any adjustments that we need to make, as we look at you know, where we have successes, you know, we may claim victory. Where we have challenges, we may add some things to the chart. You know, under the professional development, we didn't go into a lot of details. We knew that we were trying to encourage the governance team to do our own professional development, but is very well could be the case like Dr. Boone mentioned yesterday. Some of us were at the Region 2 Equity Conference last week. I attended, and I know Dr. Moore and
Ms. Allman.
yes, Ms. Allman also attended the governor's Classrooms Not Courtroom initiative. And so there's a lot of presentation and data around, you know, we've talked about restorative justice and so forth. So I think it's it should be fluid. But Dr. Boone, I don't want it to be seen as though it's some rigid instrument that is driving staff work, but it really is something that guides our policy work, our governance team level work. And so I just wanted to put that out there in terms of how folks are feeling that we're doing with it, if you feel that there should be some significant shift. But as we continue to move forward, I think we will update it with new measures that we want to consider. We just briefly talked about what's coming out of the state in terms of the profile of a new graduate. I think we've already captured more than they probably captured, but there may be some things that come out of there that we want to make sure that that we update as we, you know, continue to communicate to the public and to the state and to other stakeholders how we're performing as a division.
Well, obviously, as we've indicated, we use this as our framework and around what are our key metrics for identifying success beyond school accreditation. And from that standpoint, it's a very important document. I think the give and take on it sometimes comes from those of us, Dr. Bailey, myself, and others, who were ingrained in the Norfolk accountability system from years ago, and how we think about accountability is what are the, and you mentioned this, what are those things that we have the greatest control over? What are the things that are within our sphere of influence? And the further you are from the classroom, the more difficult it is to define that. But I think, again, as we've talked collectively about the establishment of the metrics around this, you know, what are the long-term metrics? What are the short-term indicators of success toward those metrics that we will pay attention to? And then, you know, how do we make mid-course adjustments? And so the strategy piece, I think, that's rich in the conversation for board members, but also creates the difficulty as you think about the distance actually from the classroom is, you know, so what's the professional development we can do? What are our strategies that we can use? Are our strategies the same as the district strategies? And as you just saw in the presentation, Dr. Rogers and members of academic affairs presented, it's very clear that it's not a one bullet that you put there. And so I think if you continue in thinking about when we go to conferences, when we have opportunities for gaining, increasing knowledge or learning about something, that these are the pieces that you can highlight in how you've supported the plan also. Adoption of the budget is another way that the board supports the overall plan, because every budget is built with certain assumptions around how we will address things within academic affairs. One of the areas that we did not reduce was the direct dollars to professional development, even though we had to make some staffing realignments. Our goal today in the presentation was to show you this is how we're using those professional development dollars and the time associated with it to get at this. So that's another way that the board does this. I think the value also in the accountability plan is that as data become available, and if there are no formal state data that come available, we decide then as a governance team, what are the reports that we need to have presented so that we can make sure we're paying attention to all the aspects of this beyond, because it's so easy without an accountability system, a plan like this, so everything becomes the autopsy. What's the story after something? So everything's been presented, or everything's accomplished, and then we just do a whole data dump. That's not productive. So if we're looking at data across time, I think we have that value in there. And I think, too, once we present the dashboard that's in development, the recognition that the dashboard is going to hold certain data. There are still things that we'll be focused on as a district, and so making sure that we are using this systematically will help us go forward. The challenge in terms of whether or not we're maintaining for the board, once we, I think, have gotten that greater clarity and we can declare victory on where we are, obviously there are always going to be changes, because even as the state changes its accountability system, so it says increase the number of schools fully accredited. Well, once we get into that new model, we're going to have a new benchmark.
Right, yeah, exactly.
That's going to always refresh. But I think, again, to increase the pass rate for subgroups is critically linked to that first bullet. And so how do we keep the board informed? How do you query us about our work toward accomplishing that, and how do we know that we're getting there? And so, again, once we get the greater clarity in terms of where we are, the better we'll be able to manage this. Just one other piece is we've also learned through our deeper accountability work over time is less is more. So we have a lot of indicators in the board's accountability plan. And I think going forward, we can begin to review and see, are these do we need all these indicators? Are there areas of redundancy? Are there places that we have omitted and not addressed in here? So that we aren't looking like, okay, go down the checklist, had my car service yesterday, so is everything checked? And, you know, what's not? And so that we're using it as a tool to drive our discussions and our progress.
And I think the example I use with Dr. Bailey is, you know, I think it's an important tool, but it was also useful for a snapshot in time. So we were in transition. So we started off with this 5-year strategic plan. You know, as you were coming in, the board was saying and continues to say to you, you know, we want your stamp of how you roll, whatever it is that you roll out strategically and accountability-wise throughout the division. And then we were in the midst of software changes, but we needed something to help guide us at that given point in time. And so whether it's the dashboard, or whether it's how you end up building out or lead the building out of, whether it's an accountability system or strategic plan or some hybrid as we talk about it, so that what the board is looking at and measuring filters down through the division as led by you, that we still have a way at our level to measure and monitor the work of the division.
That's right.
And the other piece of it, I think the intent was, as you mentioned, the indicator. So we ask questions, and sometimes we may ask the same question at every meeting. And so by taking the questions that we were asking and put it on a chart, then for us, we could say to ourselves, we don't have to keep asking the same question over and over again. We've already identified it as an indicator. We know it's going to come up in October or January or April. And so it allows us to be more focused and disciplined in our work and not end up, hopefully, constantly bombarding you and administration with things that we know are going to come down the pike anyway. Is that fair?
In fact, it's a proactive way for the administration to be prepared for the questions that the board will ask. So I think it streamlines the process a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is still very useful. And to your point, Dr. Boone, when the new accreditation standards come out, we'll have to modify. Or when disciplinary measures come out of Richmond, and we need to modify our approaches, or we modify our approaches first, then we'll have to modify what we're measuring here.
But I think, again, we modify to make sure we're keeping an eye on that prize, but I think we still have the opportunity to keep in here what's important to the Norfolk community.
Exactly.
And not be totally dependent upon the state representing the sum total.
Exactly.
Yes.
And this still tells us how the board impacts what the division's doing
Right.
and what our role is in helping the division do what it needs to do to be successful.
Right. And if we find we're out of line, you just have to tell, we have to have that conversation.
Right.
Because if there's something here that's dragging us below the line or something here that's dragging you all above the line, we have to be able to, talk about it and make,
Right.
like you said, course adjustments as necessary.
I take notes the entire meeting, but as we did the last one on student achievement, I think we got closer to the questions and the types of information that the board has wanted to see. And what's in this accountability plan has helped us, as Ms. Basine was saying, frame that in a way that hopefully we're getting closer. What is it? What do we know about it? What are we doing about it? And, how will we get there, and when will we know that we're moving the needle on that? And so we're trying to do our reports in that same fashion. And by doing so, I think it will begin to reduce any continuing disconnects between the data and the conversations.
Dr. Gabriel.
I mean, this level sets the expectation, and it provides common language for the board and the staff to have a joint understanding as to what our goals are and the expectations are. But since this is the summertime, and we did say that this is a fluid document, and we would review it and come to certain parts of it, I do think it's excellent, and I think it's something that is a great progress as to where we've been in the past. But I did take a couple of notes, and if I could point out a couple of areas that if the board would like to consider any changes or considerations, but under Goal 2, Safe and Secure Environments on page 8, under Identified Needs, we talk about construction and initiatives and maintenance and review. I'm not sure if we want to update that section under maintenance and review to incorporate, we have Booker T and Maury there, but we actually have a plan for several schools.
Well, and that becomes, so the issue remains the same. What we would probably need to do is, in one of the indicators or the strategy piece, it deals with the educational planning report. So right,
Right.
because that's going to give us a several-year strategy.
Right, because we're reviewing more than just what we have here.
Yeah, and just to respond, I mean, you're absolutely correct. So, at the time that we took this snapshot,
Right.
We were focused on
Exactly.
certain things.
Yep.
And then just as we'll get feedback from the, we get feedback from the pay and comp study, we integrate that. We get feedback from the alternative ed, we'll make adjustments as the items that we put here actually get implemented, and then recommendations come back, especially at the governance team level. We would then, reflect it. At this time, if you remember, we had the, what was the chart that you and Dr. Stewart,
Well, we did the,
Master milestone.
the
yeah, the master
master
milestone.
milestones,
So this
right.
was an attempt to try to
Right.
take some of that information and
Right.
make sure it gets captured in here.
Right, because, again, we'll be able to, when we show our progress, here is one that says new construction, Larchmont, Ocean View. And those are about to open. So Camp Allen will be the one remaining. And then a great place would be what are the goals and priorities that emerge through the educational planning and facilities
Right.
report.
So that was an area that I thought we could modify a little bit. And that might be something that gets modified on the dashboard, whatever that ends up becoming.
Yeah, hopefully.
And then on page 10, just something for us to consider, goal 2, again, safe and secure sensory learning environments. The very bottom of identified needs, what is the board's role in making sure the climate is improved?
That was a note to us.
That was
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, what,
Yeah.
what is our role? Is it budget, as you discussed, right, and so the feedback from administration, what is our role in making sure that the climate is improved? And then finally, under goal 3, the last one, attract, retain, and help develop strong academic families and high-quality teachers and staff. I see here that we have a lot of identified needs, but my question is, what are the strategic, from a board level perspective, and of course, Dr. Boone, your input is always welcome here and definitely needed, but what are we doing to specifically attract the families? What is our pitch? What are we doing strategically to bring them in, aside from some of the other initiatives that we've done, specialty programs and things like that? Because I'm just thinking of, in my field, and Courtney can relate to this as well, hospital-wise, some hospitals, they specialize in cancer centers or heart centers or birthing centers, or in practices, we specialize in, some have evening hours, some have weekend hours. What are we doing to bring in the pool of families that we have in Norfolk to attract and retain them, so that we can at least try to maintain our membership or work with that? Because I think that the Norfolk census says that the Norfolk census is growing, that we've had an increase. Now, whether that's children.
But not of school.
Birth rates are
Not of
down.
children,
Right.
but there are
Millennials are not having
populations that we
children.
can take advantage of, that we can
Right.
try to.
Well,
So anyways, that's just something that I wanted to throw out there for discussion, since we're discussing the accountability plan.
Couple of pieces with that. The board has, as we've talked about, working on a very clear marketing and communications plan. The first part of our conversation today on what's the progress of our schools is our first marketing tool. I think as we look at our ability to attract and retain staff, that's going to be another attracting pool in terms of how people are seeing our schools. What are they, the results from that. We have people who are interested in working in Norfolk Public Schools. Some of the community and parent engagement won't necessarily all fit in this section. There are threads throughout. So when we talk about the communication and marketing, the what goes on in human resources, what are the opportunities for our schools, our strong focus, on specialty program schools and niche opportunities are something that we will be marketing very highly with our schools. The number of advanced placement courses that are available to students at all levels, at our high schools at no additional cost to families. Our expansion of dual enrollment opportunities, the work that we're doing with TCC, Virginia Wesleyan, and other colleges. All of those will become the evidence of what we're doing. The results we will look at and see, are we attracting more? Are we maintaining? The other caution that I have for us, even as we think about this, are those things that are outside of our control. What happens to huge sectors of population in the city? We've heard the city council discussion relative to the St. Paul's Quadrant and public housing that's there. That's a big unknown for us. And so how do we pay attention to school declines and the difference between dissatisfaction with the schools and exiting and people leaving the city for other reasons? And so all of that, I think, will represent the very rich discussions that we have about what's going on. Our great work is quiet, and we're going to make it more pronounced, but to do it in a way of this is what we currently have and this is our future. That educational planning piece, being able to talk about the community's investment in new schools and facilities. The CTE piece will be something that no one else has. And how do we leverage all of that to be that engagement of one? How do we retain the families that we have, and how do we recruit other families in?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your comments, Dr. Boone, because, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, we don't have evidence, at least as yet, that we are losing families due to the condition of our schools. What we do know are decreased birth rates. We do know decreases school-age populations, and that's what we know. So I caution all of us, to, not just board members, but faculty, other community members, city leaders, I caution all of us in how we put that narrative out there that we are incapable of attracting families, maintaining families, and that we are losing families. Because I know we are losing families, but we also are gaining families. And we may be gaining families at a much larger rate than we're losing. And I know we are losing families for a variety of reasons that aren't due to the condition of our schools. So I think the marketing also starts with the achievement level of our schools, but also starts with us and the tone that we all set as citizens and board members. So
anecdotally, let me say this. People in this region are really paying attention to what's happening in Norfolk Public Schools. We see that in community conversations, whether we're in various business meetings and everything else, but we're also seeing it with the quality of our applicants. Yes, we've lost teachers to neighboring districts, but we're gaining teachers from neighboring districts, other states, who will tell us, this is the place I want to work. And it's not that they're escaping something else and they want to be here. We have, in our policy, the superintendent can allow staff, teachers particularly, to enroll their children in Norfolk Public Schools if they work here, may not live in the city. We have veteran teachers who are moving into this city to work with us, who are coming into our schools and have made those requests. And so it speaks a lot when a person who works in the school is willing to bring their children to the same school, regardless of whatever label or anything else is happening. I laughed yesterday at the Equity conference. It felt like old home, a reunion, and saw people I hadn't seen in, of course, the 7-8 years when I was gone. And since I've returned and hadn't seen them, but people I haven't seen in years. That's when I know people are paying attention to the work, because of what they say about the work. And I'm like, oh, wow, you knew that? I mean, it's not just the surface, oh, hey, you know. But they are really talking about what they are seeing in the district. Being able to change the conversation about the district goes a long way. And I hear what you're saying, Dr. Gable, and I certainly agree with Ms. Basine. How we promote the schools, is it always doom and gloom? Or is it that we're saying this is where we are, or we're driving this energy bus now?
Right.
And so what are we saying? We are celebrating those things that are key progress, and we're acknowledging those areas that we still have room to grow. We aren't sweeping anything under the rug, but we are making a firm commitment. And, you know, we've talked often about changing the story of Norfolk within the media. And a lot of that has been due to the stability within the district and just focusing on our work, how we do business, so that every time we sneeze doesn't become today's headline. But rather there's substance, such as a young man that is obviously very academically talented, one of less than 1% of students who achieve a perfect score in the ACT. These are the stories. Yeah, Grand Behind. These are the things that we're seeing, and the only celebrations aren't limited to our athletics. But we also, in our marketing, talk about the fact that we have an elementary strings program that has been preserved even through tough economic times, and we haven't stepped straight away from that. So being able to tell that story, somebody, I was there with a colleague yesterday, and the comment was made, and so somebody was saying something to me. He said, oh yeah, she's bearing the burdens of Norfolk. I said, oh no, these aren't burdens, these are great opportunities. And so I quickly pushed back on the fact that the work I was doing was a burden. These aren't burdens. We had gotten off track, off course on a lot of things, but that's not our destination. That's where we've been. And so I don't accept the being burdened as being our destination. But how we talk about our district is when people will begin to talk about us differently too, and think about us differently.
Dr. Robinson.
Got several things come to mind when I listen to this conversation, but number one is self-fulfilling prophecy. You keep saying you're no good, that's what's going to happen, but I see the evidence that the ship is turning and it's moving in the right direction. And getting back to the accountability plan, the original discussion here, what the accountability plan document allows us to do as a board is to monitor the progress that the school district is making, both, and I referenced Stephen Covey's work on the 4 disciplines of execution. He talks about having this wildly important goal. That's the first thing you start with. Mm-hmm. And the wildly important goal is 100% of our students are meeting or exceeding standards. And when you get buy-in from the team, from the superintendent all the way down to the service people in the bus garage and in between, and they're all striving to reach that pinnacle, this allows not only the lag measures, the SOL scores, the achievement scores, even some of the other more obscure scores that we're keeping track of. But what it really does is allows us to monitor the lead measures. What are we actually engaging in? What are we doing in to move those measures? That's why I appreciate Dr. Rogers' presentation today, because what we talked about is how are we getting there, and what are we doing to get there? And the scores will come as a result. And I see big things. And what's going to happen is as these lead measures are implemented and monitored with fidelity, the lag measures will follow as a natural result, and that's what's going to draw more people to Norfolk Public Schools. They're going to want to be part of this process, and I already see that happening through our HR development and what have you. So I see good things happening for this division.
And we also talked about, as you go through, Quinn's book, and he talks about these accountability systems. One of the things that he points out is these things don't happen overnight. They are 3, 4, 5, 10 years in development. So we are still very early on in the stages. And to your point, Dr. Gabriel, about, specifically about retaining the track, if you remember when Tracy Richter was here, and I think Dennis Footy has also given us information, when you look over time, it's been kind of steady in terms of the percentage of students, of eligible school-age children in Norfolk who attend Norfolk Public Schools during this time, that time, and in between. So we've kind of been pretty good. But I share your, as you know, your passion in terms of what do we do to attract more, which ties back to our goals, which is why this is there. In the particular area where it was saying the board's role in making sure climate is improved, that went back to the research and the conversation that we've had around the role of school climate and its ability to attract. That when you look at the surveys that were coming, especially around teachers and educators, there was conversation around the climate in the building, and then there's obviously always, not always, but often conversation around compensation. So we knew, and we did a couple of things. The whole effort around the pay and comp study and actions that we took to get that first phase in to begin to address the compression was, one piece of that. And then, as you often ask us to make sure that we're paying attention to the climate survey results, we put this here. So it gives us as a board a place to come and have that conversation so that we can see whether or not over time, because again, how people may feel today versus how they may feel 3 years from now, you just don't know. But it puts it here at a board level for us to have that conversation and look at, are there things that we can do or say to the superintendent, whether it's budget time or not budget time, where we can have positive impact on teacher morale. Or, Ms. Doyle has, been consistent about, we just talked about it, I think we're in Richmond, about the teacher voice in the student discipline process and the tribunal process. I mean, all those things have come up from issues or questions the board have raised, and then what we try to do is reflect it here so we can monitor, our progress, and not something that just gets thrown out there and then we forget about it, and then you come back a year later and you say, oh, well, what about that? So it tries to keep us on track in some areas. Ms. Messine.
And most importantly, what our role is that we hold the superintendent accountable for improving the climate. And so I think that's right there, and then, where our role is.
Dr. Robinson.
And what this accountability plan allows us to do is, because we know that change is going to come to the school board, this is going to give a foundation of where to start.
Yes.
Instead of
Language,
having to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is made, people are going to have their opinions to it, but this is what we measure, what we do here at Norfolk Public Schools, so it's going to allow for whatever change to occur, that we can keep moving forward as best we can.
I think it's very solid.
And I guess as we, invite Dr. Bailey and folks to come out, I guess part of what I want to make sure is, as a board, that we are recognizing that while we have staff support to keep this thing updated, it is not to be busy work for your staff to keep this thing up. I mean, this is our work. We get the information. We want your support in helping us to populate the information, make sure the benchmark things get there. But this is not to be staff busy work. This is to be school board work. So, we're good with that?
Good.
Okay, so we know we're gonna have to update this, and I would think as we come towards that October timeframe, we say we would get more of the information from the state, but also have an opportunity for a lot of the other indicators. We would come back with a updated version of this based upon feedback we've received from the board and data and information that we get from our various sources. But if there are other ideas like that, if you email it,
Yeah.
like you just described, with a specific page number, then we can factor that into the next version. Well, I think there's, I'm just saying, just generally, it's a fluid thing, and we just have to be able to update it so it reflects the the will of the whole board. So. All right, Dr. Boone, thank you, everyone, for that. So that was very helpful.
Dr. Bailey, and I guess you'll call on Mr. Fuddy when Mr. Fuddy?
Go to the NPS scorecard.
And let me just say, Dr. Bailey and Dr. Birdsong have been in Washington, D.C. with our military connections and the DODEA work and everything, and so she's hot off the road or over the airways and just gotten here. Dr. Birdsong is closing out that conference, so glad to have you
Thank
back.
you. So what we have for you today, based on our discussion, or my discussion with Mr. Jordan on Friday, after we walked up the steps, we decided that what we will call our paper copy of the dashboard will be an NPS scorecard. And there'll be some minor differences because in our NPS scorecard, there'll be some areas that don't lend themselves to be displayed electronically. And so what we have done with the NPS scorecard, as you look through that document, we have created somewhat of a crosswalk for you as it relates to some of the identified needs that you have indicated in your plan. And so as you look at that, you'll have certainly the dashboard number, the report or presentation, and that's whether we would provide a report or would it be a presentation to you as a board, the date that the information is available, and then the responsible department. And some of this will be used internally for us as we monitor the data as it comes in. So as we move forward into the very first section.
Can you just pause there for a second? Because one of the things I just want to reiterate, for us from the board perspective, the column about the date of the information being available. So when we talk, we have a lot of conversation about our norms and requested data. One of the things we can do to help them out is if we pull up this chart, it'll remind us when the data is available. So when we request things, we would have an idea of when it's available and not be in the habit of requesting things and they don't have it.
So we have the months indicated there.
Right. So, for example, AP data will become available in August. The student data has been rolled out to students, but the summarized data will not become available to the district until August. SAT will become available in August. Last year, due to some problems that they may have had at College Board, we didn't receive that data until late September, October. So that's just an example as to letting you know when the data comes. Then we try to prepare it and analyze it as well. As we move through this particular document, to where we have the first goal, we have goal 1A, improve student achievement and outcomes. We have provided an update here. Is that what we did? Okay. Keep going, Janelle, to the next page. Next page. Next page. Okay, here. We will be updating this once the state has done their press release, but we have updated some aspects of this, and as we move forward towards the back, we have included climate survey information. And what I think I anticipate is that once we get this NPS scorecard completed, then we'll have a full discussion about the information that has been updated, whether we met our target that we had agreed upon earlier in the school year. So let me pause at this time just to see if you have any questions. There hasn't been that many changes to this piece of the document.
And the targets were the ones that we worked on last school year to set for this school year. And those are the ones in the 16-17 red column.
Yes.
So just for clarification, so the gifted, and then you have the pass advanced, is that the number of pass advanced? Not necessarily that.
What page are you
on
Right.
1A, that, the
Under-
same page we've been
Begins
on.
with English or any,
The subgroup
Oh.
gifted, pass advanced, that percentage is the number that's pass advanced?
Pass advanced right here.
I think the goal is the percent of gifted students who achieved in advanced rating scoring on their various SOL tests.
Okay,
Not just students who
Right.
achieve pass advance.
right.
Because the idea is that are we seeing our gifted students maximize their potential?
Correct.
Again, with that caveat and umbrella, that students show general intellectual aptitude or it could be aptitude in one particular area, and so we're gonna have to kind of navigate.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I understood what that was.
Yeah, as Dr. Bailey said, I did update the climate information. There'll be a subsequent full report due soon. We have conference call with the vendor about the parent survey next week, so that's been completed. Hopefully, we'll see the report soon. That's the only portion of the document that I'm aware of that was updated since the last time you saw it. And most of the other data is not available, won't be available for at least a couple weeks. So the SOL data probably be the next iteration.
So one of the things that we wanted to do, just for the sake of time, is we wanted to also demo some work that we have done creating this type of document in electronic format. And I'm going to go over to where Janelle is to do some of the driving. But we were very excited about this. Once we got the application purchased and whatnot and set up the training dates, we were able to put something together, certainly for today, within a short period of time. And so I'll let Dennis talk to you a little bit further about that while I go over to drive.
The application is called iDashboard. We had training last week, several of us. I want to thank the members of the group that participated in developing that, and that's Greg Williams, Ron Brown, Daniel Varner, Tressa Allenbach, Tommy Etheridge, Kim Bronson, and Sonia Bridger. So from that list, there were multi-departmental. Dan Varner is in communications. Tommy Etheridge is in the SIS group, and two of our specialists out in the school. So it was a multi-departmental effort to put this together. And go ahead.
So what we have done, we have placed the iDashboard under the Assessment, Research, and Accountability website. And so if you want to follow along with this, that's fine, but I will go ahead and click on iDashboard.
Actually, if you've got your laptops up, you can click on and do the same thing at the same time. It's live.
And so once you get to that point, if you could click on either the picture of the students or the apple.
Just remind us again where you started. You went,
Help us
The
out here.
NPS webpage, go to the Arrow Department.
okay,
Right.
okay.
See their list off to the left.
Yes, okay.
And as we've talked about, as we get this, we're going to have it very, very prominent.
And it's under,
A,
Under
right,
quick
click there.
links.
assessment, research, and
You're
accountability.
down to the
So
left
if you
to see-
slide down,
Okay.
you'll see iDashboard.
Mm-hmm.
Then it'll bring up a smaller page, and then if you click on the picture of the students, it will enhance to a larger view.
So here you have two icons. One gives you district information, and the other one, you have two icons. One gives you district information, and the other one to the right gives you school information. So Karen, probably start with the district information.
Okay.
Click on it, and it will bring up a dashboard.
Okay.
Exciting.
And I know we've already left the page, but I love the way they've used the NPS Apple and put
I
school
like
names
that
around
too.
it, so
I really like that.
kudos to the team.
Yeah, that was Daniel Bonner's creation
Yes.
for communications. Yeah.
You'll notice that you can select all students, and Karen, if you would then select the subgroup. You can select subgroups, and it will populate for all of the 5 areas of SOLs. You'll see the 3 years of trend. When the state's data finally is available for the 16-17 year, then we'll load that into this dashboard. Now, there's one other feature in the dashboard. That is, you go over to get if you click on a year, you get all of those values.
Is this hosted on our platform or is it externally hosted?
It is hosted within the district.
Is it? That's
Yes.
great.
You can also then pull this information, which gives you a breakdown of the individual subjects within each of the subject areas. So for reading, you have all of the different grade level tests, passing percentages, as well as pass percent, advanced.
Those individual data point dots get you a lot of information.
And this is live right now.
You're smiling,
so-
you like it?
So anybody can go to this
Yes.
Yes.
and they can do this.
Yes.
When will
And
2016, 17 be?
After the state releases
After the state,
data.
okay,
Right,
that
because
makes sense, okay.
we're populating from the official
Right,
state
okay.
data. And so there, again, this is why this current dashboard won't cover everything that's in the accountability plan, because the state doesn't measure everything that we're measuring as a district. But it'll make the state data and all of those details very readily available.
I would like to see if you, as you use this and look at it, any suggestions that you might have of the way to present the data, because this is our first iteration of a dashboard, and we would expect, as the accountability plan will undergo some modifications and iterations and as we move forward. So this is all district data. If you just flip it, you can go to the school data.
Can I just, I think it would be neat to be able to compare 2 subgroups, especially when looking at.
That's the
what?
same thing I said when we met, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be an additional feature, you know, the compare feature where, you know, some
Right,
dashboards
like
allow you to
You
compare.
can on the school quality profiles.
Yeah, and then
That
even-
would have to be in a future iteration.
Right, and even as we look at achievement gaps, you know, and how we're closing the gap, I think looking at that would be useful.
Let's look at school data.
Click a school and pull up their data for all students.
Now,
and
you'll
by
notice
subgroup.
that she brought up, and there's only 1 dot. It's because there's only 1 year's worth of data for that school.
Right.
So it does not populate it if there's no data for that school.
And so, like for Rosemont, if a parent were to search Rosemont, is there something that says?
No.
The scores go back to the home school or anything like that?
No, we haven't
Okay.
didn't be able to do that yet.
Okay.
Well, I commend you all on this. This is excellent.
We've been working to
Fabulous
try
job.
to have an electronic dashboard. Will be a work in progress for quite some time, but we'll continue to strengthen it, and we appreciate any input and suggestions that you have over time. The comparative piece makes sense. Again, you know, as we talk about issues of how well students are doing, some schools, very often, people like to paint a broad brush that all students in this particular category aren't doing well, and such is not the case when you can see this one finger access. And as I said, I believe it's scheduled after we populate the 16-17 data, then we can move it to the main web page, so it'll be one-click access.
I think this goes a long way towards transparency
It sure
and myth busting. For those that are saying things that are not true, we
Yep.
direct them here. And I think this becomes obviously the source of truth, which is fabulous. So I really commend the division for putting this together and being very transparent with what we have and showing off our great work.
Dr. Bailey,
Of our
Mr.
students.
Fuddy, and team, we're very appreciative of the very hard work they've been doing on this. And, you know, we pushed to try to have a rollout consistent with this 17-18 school year. And so it's taken a lot of work to get it to this point.
Dr. Robinson?
I would suggest, if it hasn't been done already, but to put this on the access to it on the homepage.
Yes,
of
that's
the-
what I was saying, on the main webpage.
I'm
we're
sorry,
gonna have a
I missed that.
No, that's what we're gonna do. But we think, so that we don't get a lot of questions, because it's not new data, we'll do that in conjunction with the population of the 16-17 data
I mean,
later in the month.
If I'm moving into a neighborhood and I want to look at schools, I get the skinny right from the state right there.
We'll discourage that, since we have students all over the place, but yeah, people, I mean, that's what
People
people
are going to
do.
do that. That's what
They
people
it.
do.
That's
I mean,
Absolutely.
that
do.
drives
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
to buy a home.
And they'll go to a variety of websites, and we have ours right here.
We'll take care of the students, and people can choose their houses likewise, so.
Right, and you know, I would like to say that as the team came together and started on this and started to develop, a lot of ideas came up. And so we're very excited about doing this and being able to project our data in this format. So,
The plan is that what you see on the dashboard in the printed version, most of it, if not all of it, will be transitioned over to this application. So there'll be different dashboards, but then the question we have to deal with is how do we structure this, and where do you play it? And it fits into what Dr. Boone said about a marketing plan.
Right.
And how does the district market the information and the successes?
The fact that parents will have, excuse me for butting in, but just the fact that parents will have access easily to this information is a plus, and that's part of, that can be included in the marketing plan.
So Dr. Boone and
And engagement.
Dr. Bailey and Mr. Footy, you know, we just thank you for your patience with us. We know we've pushed and asked about it, and we know you had a lot of infrastructure transitions that you had to go through to get to this point, but thank you again for putting this in, and I'm sure that last Friday wasn't the only non-working day that you all made your way in, so we appreciate that effort.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, great work.
All right, anything else on the dashboard or the accountability plan or anything in that portion of the meeting? Good. All right, so we will press on, and I think next up is our specialty program update. From that. I'm sorry, oh, am I out of order? Oh, board of distinction, oh, okay, you get to relax some more. So I sent to, you know, we've been working on our norms and protocols. We discussed them in our last work session. We discussed them some more in Richmond. With Ms. Wagner not here, you know, I'd like for us to wait and vote on them at the next meeting, because I think it's important that everybody,
Are we all going to be here at the next meeting?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so.
I think if we're not, we still proceed.
Yeah,
These
well,
have been
I mean,
lingering way too long.
I agree.
I'll
Look,
try my best to be here.
what's important to me right now is from
Oh,
a
and if Noel, Dr. Gabriel, is out due to, you know, Mother
well,
Nature.
yes.
you can, we'll get a proxy before then, but
I'll count as 2 votes today if you want.
I guess the important thing is
Or up during contraction.
content-wise.
Yes, fast,
All right, where's my guy?
Fast.
Okay, we've been at it too long. But content-wise, from the norms and protocols that we've discussed, is everybody comfortable with the language that's there now? Is there anything anybody want to change?
No.
All right, so, Ms. Banks, just for the record, so we're gonna note this, that the August 2nd, 2017 version is the version that we're going to adopt.
Delete all other versions.
Delete all other versions, and then we'll add that to the consent agenda for, what's our next meeting?
August 16th.
Oh, yes.
August
So we have a
16th.
hybrid
Can we-
workshop in business.
Okay, sir?
I would suggest that we take it off the consent agenda, because this is such a huge thing that I personally think we should vote on it.
That's, I mean, what, in any, yeah, it's fine, I mean,
Sounds good.
Even if
accept
it's
that.
just a voice vote,
okay,
I still think it's important enough
I'll
to
support
guide
that.
our work
Okay.
now and in the future, that this is, we take this stand.
great point, great point. I think we are all in agreement with that. And then also just make note also of our, violation policy. Everybody's comfortable with that? And
Haywood.
we are designating Reverend Haywood as our,
In it all.
Sergeant at Arms for 2017, 2018. You accept that responsibility, sir?
The bouncer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, so we're good with that then. Also, we talked about committee assignments. They're pretty much as they have been. Any questions or anything about that? Any changes anyone would like? I didn't list, excuse me, the student support committee members, because we all know who they are. But we're all good with those as well, is that correct? And then as far as the advisory committees, is really more as liaisons. Ms. Basine, you've been the liaison to GAC. Do you want to continue in that role? And then you and Dr. Gabriel have been liaisons to the SHAC, but I also know that last year, Dr. Robinson, you had expressed some interest. Did you all want to do any modifications there with the SHAC? You had
No,
raised.
I'm
You
good.
comfortable?
I'm
Okay.
comfortable.
Okay, and you all are still good with that. Ms. Wagner had been performing as the liaison with SEAC, but I'm going to talk to her about swapping with me, and that I would be the liaison to SEAC and ask her if she would be the liaison to the PTA. I think
A great idea.
she's very much engaged with, advocate for the community and parental involvement piece.
Yeah.
And so I was going to talk to her about us switching in that regard. And then access, I know Dr. Robinson, you mentioned that they were looking at doing some changes, but for now, you would still be the
yeah, absolutely.
point person. Dr. Gabriel, you've been taking care of Governor's School. Reverend Haywood, what's your preference with WHRO?
I'm fine with that. I
You
just
continue
need
with
to-
that?
yeah,
Okay, so we
that's-
can let them know that. We talked about PTA, and I think Ms. Wagner would continue with CSEP, and then I've been working with Dr. Boone and the team with United for Children. So
Okay.
I took off of, when we have these observer-only areas, I don't know. I don't know how we're, I think we kind of, I think we just need to talk about that some more.
What's that?
I know from the library's perspective, Ms. Wagner has been going there, but I think later on in the meeting, I'm going to talk some more about some joint meeting opportunities. And so when we get the opportunity to talk with some of these boards, and I think ongoing conversations with the city manager now that he's in place, we can talk about to what extent this makes sense. I just think we're in so many meetings that, anybody can go observe the other board meetings, but in terms of trying to say to a school board member to add more time to your schedule, I'm just hesitant of doing that at this point. And then,
Could I
Yes, sir.
interject? Just, as far as the library board, if we're not gonna have a direct connection there. We've got to make sure that we have some sort of conduit for, other than just emails passing back and forth, because that is such an important asset that we can use to supplement student learning.
Yes, I think from the administration perspective that there's communication,
We have a,
and then
Okay.
there's also a lot, no, I just wanted, so everybody's aware, and then also, library representative, serves with the Norfolk Council of PTAs. And like I said, I know Ms. Wagner has been attending some of their meetings. It just seems to me, if we say we're an observer, what does that mean? Do we just go watch? Or do we want to have a real meaningful relationship? And I think if it's something beyond that, we need to talk to them. What does that look like? And tie it into the work that, Dr. Boone is leading from an administrative standpoint.
we have a long-standing partnership and relationship with the public library. Something was forwarded to us recently. We were able to show we were already aware of it and supporting it. And certainly Valerie Ford, who's our coordinator for library and media services, is the point person in our work with the public library. So that's been going very well.
Good. Well, and NHRA would be another example of
Right.
that, of having a good partnership with them, because they serve so many of our
Absolutely.
constituents that we need to make sure that we capitalize on any initiatives that we can work together on.
Reverend Haywood?
I think it will be important for you to work out that agreement with the city manager, because, I've attended those NHRA meetings, and I basically was sitting with the public, had no interaction really with the board.
Yeah.
And so, my presence there was not really, I didn't see a whole lot of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, and they have they're a governing body like we are, but I think if there are initiatives or committees or opportunity to collaborate, that's where the potential values, or even as we were just going through our, well, I guess actually we're getting ready to go through our discussion again of the educational planning committee. So we've gone out of our way to make sure that we include individuals from the housing authority or city planning and so forth in our work. And I think if they would do likewise, if they have committees to make sure that school board members or members of the school administration are part of their efforts, that's the way I think we can bridge some of that
Yes.
collaboration.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because what I was thinking as well is that there may be an opportunity for some of their board members to sit with us in our working board meetings, so that they will understand what we're doing.
Or if we're doing presentations, when, like I said, I know they're gonna have roles to play on the educational
Exactly.
planning committee. I know that some of them are actively involved as supporters or sponsors of activities that the Education Foundation puts on. So I think the main thing is just having these avenues and opportunities for communication and collaboration. So as Dr. Boone said earlier, if the Housing Authority is planning something, or if the Planning Commission is going to consider developments that's going to have impact, that communication and openness is taking place. Ms. Doyle?
Well, the Economic Development Authority is the same.
Right.
Today I actually went to their meeting as an observer, and the schools did come up in a very constructive way, and they want to help us, and they want to work with us, and they know that we need to understand what the city is doing, what planning is doing, et cetera, and then I brought up the educational planning
Right.
that we're doing this fall. So they are all in and wanting to help us. So there are many that are out there that would be willing to sit with the table with us.
And I'll just take a moment I'll just note it now, it's gonna come back later, so, I was, as an individual, I had appeared before city council to talk about St. Paul's and some other information that they had in the general plan. And so I had a follow-up meeting with, the planning director and some of his staff to talk about concentrated poverty and things of that type. And so one of the things I had said to them was, I was thanking them for the work that I knew that they were doing, getting information to the school system as part of the educational planning work. But we had talked about I guess last year, maybe even 2 years ago, about trying to have a joint meeting with them. So the director reached out to the planning commission, and they have offered a date for us to consider, which would be, it's a Thursday, November, let's see, November the 2nd. So they were recommending maybe 4 o'clock, Thursday, November 2nd, and I just told them I would come back and share it with Dr. Boone and share it with the board, because that would be after we're currently scheduled to have the presentation from the Educational Planning Committee, and it may be just an opportunity for us to then just talk about some things following that. So I just want to put that out there. I know we have to check our schedules and really, get Dr. Boone's feedback. Thursday, November 2nd is what they,
7 o'clock?
4 o'clock, and we would meet over, they have their meetings in the city council, 10th floor. And so
this is which,
this would be with the planning commission. So I just put that out there as a hold the date type thing.
Yeah.
And then we can just talk about it some more once Dr. Boone and her team gets a chance to digest it and see that we can make it into a productive meeting. So that's really all I have on that for now. I took out of this chart the different conferences because I didn't see it as a committee thing. We know that we're committed, as we talked about, an accountability plan to our own professional development, and individual school board members can coordinate with Ms. Banks, so we can coordinate with each other our efforts to attend the various conferences, whether they're local or otherwise.
I didn't look at, do we have the calendar of those events?
Yes, in the, it's not on this one, but at the previous meeting, Ms. Banks gave us the annual calendar, and she can resend that, yeah. I asked her, don't add it this time, because there's so many documents, I just want us to hone in on these 3 things.
It's in the green folder.
But she gave it to us last time, and we can
I'll take a look. and
send
find
it to us again. Anything else from board PD, thoughts coming out of the training that we have? We have another training coming up here, I believe it's October 13th.
Yeah.
So that'll be a 1-day.
Where is that again?
That'll be here, somewhere in Norfolk.
Oh,
Ms.
which-
Basine?
So two thoughts. So about the board PD, and we briefly talked about this. I think it would be useful for all 8 of us to participate in the superintendent evaluation workshop.
Yeah, you did
I
mention
know
that.
there's one September 14th, and that might be too close for all of us, but I think we talked about possibly seeing if VSBA could come down and do one for us.
Or a webinar. I think there was, one of them is
Webinar.
a webinar, we can check, we'll check with V. I think
Yeah.
there's,
Well, the workshop's usually in-house.
okay.
Yeah, and I did it last year, and I found it useful, but I noticed that others that were there as a board and superintendent, as a team, so.
Yeah,
I
we
think
did that,
would be helpful.
I think it was the year before you came on, and I think they made
And
a
then they-
special effort for us, yeah.
They had a woman who was not yet superintendent elsewhere. She retired from somewhere, so she was interim. She came down and she trained all of us.
Right.
Okay.
But we can definitely follow to make sure that we're all on the same page.
And that might have been before the new,
No, it was after the new.
it was
Yeah.
after the new?
Yeah, unless they
Okay.
made some new
It was
modifications.
the
Okay.
first year of the new.
And the other is just a thought about, I know we don't need additional meetings, but a thought given the current state of, teacher shortages, our goal around, attracting and retaining teachers and and just some of the challenges that we have faced, will likely face in terms of personnel. I've been kind of looking into what other districts are doing from a board level, and noticed that one of their master committees is a personnel committee. And I wonder if that's something that we could talk about, so that some of the questions that we do come up as a whole, if, just like in our other committees where we have 2 board members actually, get more of the, have deeper discussions around personnel issues, retention, things like that, and even how it impacts our policies, such as our reduction in force policy and things like that, how that impacts that. If a personnel committee would be something of use or something to consider, or if that's even something that MPS has done in the past, and if so, how it's kind of evolved over time.
The only thought I would have at this point is to not just research the existence of those, but what they do, because in some places, staff begin to interpret that committee as being the place that they go for staff concerns, and that can't be the function of this group.
No, and that's
Right,
not
but
what
I'm just saying, these are some awareness things
Okay.
of where there have been personnel or employee relations committees.
Okay.
But they tend to almost evolve into, so as you research, not just the existence, but what do they actually do? Because we bring, I think the difference with personnel and some other things is very similar to student support services. There's a place where there's action can be taken, and the statute allows us, the code allows us to do the board to do certain things in terms of a panel, committee to deal with student discipline. But the code is very clear that only the full board can take personnel action. And so then what would be the role beyond the whole group conversation of some of this? And understand, I'm not pushing back, just experiential things I'm sharing.
Yeah, and I would, maybe in your research, just kind of share with us what are some things that are happening you're seeing others are dealing from a personnel committee that maybe we should consider as part of our closed session work. Each year when we talk about these committees, I'm personally just
A lot.
hesitant, not necessarily because of time commitment, but just going back to, a lot of the governance team research. The more you create these committees, then the further the full board gets away from understanding. And, one of our values and norms we just kind of talked about was trying to make sure that the entire board has information
All the information.
as soon as possible. And so when we get into the committees, it's just very difficult because you have conversations at the committee level that we just don't have as a full board. And I just think we just have to be careful that we don't create so many committees that we end up compartmentalizing the information and make it even more difficult for all 7 or all 8 of us to be together in terms of the work. But, I'll just say if you have some thoughts or recommendations for it, just tee it up and we can see if it makes sense for us.
Okay.
Anything else?
If we could just put all of these on the calendar, because it's not even all here, like October 13th is not on our calendar right now.
Well,
is
she
the
did,
thing for
to
October 13th?
Janelle's,
And I'm not saying,
yeah.
I know we're all just kind of doing this organization now, so I'm not saying
Yeah.
anything should have been, but let's
Yeah.
just get that out there. 'cause
Yeah,
it's around the
personally,
clock.
you all know me, I
We have
like
agenda
everything being
planning tomorrow.
electronic.
That's when
Yeah,
we update.
Right, yeah, we have agenda planning tomorrow.
We have agenda planning tomorrow, Ms. Doyle, and that's when we normally would update calendar.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else as far as the board of distinction, board work, committees, governance documents? We're good for now? Okay. Well, let's continue, and we can come back later, I think, after we finish the academic affairs and check our time and see how we want to have additional discussions around our board goals for for the upcoming year. Yeah, so I think it might be good to hear the rest of the staff presentations before we get into that. So let's proceed with academic affairs and go back to the specialty program review and
Dr.
update.
Rogers and Mr. Coleman, the board had asked us as a follow-up to our mini retreat in January, where we discussed specialty programs in schools, that we provide an update of how we finished the year, what's anticipated and planned for the coming year, because we can come back later in the fall and talk about what actually happened once students are in place. So, Dr. Rogers and Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Dr. Boone. Chairman Jordan, school board members. As Dr. Boone shared, this is a follow-up from your January retreat where we had lots of posted paper around the room, and we talked about how to strengthen, well, what were the strengths in our specialty program and how we can go about strengthening our specialty programs in the district. And one of the outcomes of that meeting was to formulate a committee that consisted of staff members all throughout the school district to come together to really talk about what was working well with our specialty programs and also what were some of the opportunities for improvement. We've had discussion and conversation this afternoon about how do we attract people or families to come to our school district and what makes our school district special or different. Well, we have some very unique specialty programs, some of which are highlighted here, and we have some unique opportunities to capitalize on some things that are very unique to the city of Norfolk. And what Mr. Coleman has done is he's led an effort with a group of, I guess, about 30 to 40 staff members throughout the school district to begin that conversation and that work. They've had a couple of meetings this spring, and they anticipate continuing those meetings throughout the course of next school year and helping to shape what that work looks like. And the collaborative effort has been not only through academic affairs, but has consisted of department representation all throughout the school district. So without further ado, I'll have Mr. Coleman come up and share where we are and where we are headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Chairman Jordan, Superintendent Boone, board members. The specialty programs in Norfolk Public Schools are really a bright diamond in our district. We've got really some excellent programs that are taking place. There are some absolutely outstanding students that are participating in them, but we know that over the course of time, things need to evolve. So 30 years ago, when that first program came into place and it was headlined or put under the cap of specialty, things have changed over those 30 years, and we've added programs, we've added schools, we've added theme schools. And so if you recall back in January, one of the dilemmas that we were struggling with at the time is, what do we call everything and how does it all fit in? And so that's one of the things that we'll be talking about today as well. So just to kind of recap our current NPS specialty programs, and I'll use the word specialty fairly loosely here, because at the high school level, they are specialty programs within a school. So you've got the Granby International Baccalaureate, the Morey High School Medical and Health Specialty Program, the Lake Taylor High School Military Science and Leadership, the Booker T. Washington Academy for Performing Arts, the Norview High School Engineering and Leadership Program. Going into the middle schools, you've got the Blair Middle School Pre-Medical and Pre-Engineering. You've got the Young Scholars at Rosemont. You've got Academy of International Studies that is now at Rosemont. And then we also have the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood, Southside STEM Academy at Compostela, and then the Ghent K-8 school fits in there somewhere as well. And so if you kind of consider we've got multiple aspects of programs and different ways of looking at things, we've really added things in, but we've lumped things under that umbrella of specialty. And that really probably is not doing us justice for all of the programs. The current status, and I say current as of yesterday, I tried to pull some of these numbers, and I would like to highlight that these numbers are not 100% hard and fast, particularly in the offered and accepted columns. We still have students that are coming off a wait list. We still have students that, even though they've verbally or given us a letter of acceptance, we have to have them enrolled before we actually will count them. And so those numbers will fluctuate a little bit. I wouldn't say they'll fluctuate substantially, but it is not a hard and fast number as of today. Normally, we would wait until after the 10-day count in September, and then we would have a better understanding of our hard and fast numbers in each of those columns. When you look at the students going into our high school programs this year, Granby High School, 287 total applications. To date, 107 offers were made to students, and to date, 59 students have accepted and are fully through the enrollment process. So I'm going to highlight at this time, when you look at that 287 applied, when you now go to Maury at 235 applied, many of those same students applied to the same schools. And so they may have been offered to both Granby and Maury, or maybe even Norview or Lake Taylor, but they can only accept one. So that's why you'll always see in that offer column a higher number than what's accepted, because if a student got accepted or offered to all three, they can only accept to one, obviously.
So it's not an unduplicated count.
That's correct. So again, you can see the numbers then for the Norview Center for Leadership and Engineering, the Lake Taylor Military Science, and the Booker T for Performing Arts. Any questions with this data, and then I'll move on.
Just, it might be helpful to put one more column on there to say how many slots are available. That's
We
all
can
I
do
would
that,
add. although
it sometimes can fluctuate there a little bit, but generally speaking, yes, we can put a number in there. I can tell you right now for Granby, it's usually around 65.
Okay. Yeah, see,
For
so like
Maury, it's around 55.
Okay,
Norview's about 55 to 60. They can fluctuate just a little bit.
okay.
Lake Taylor and Booker T, we really don't have a cap at this time.
And generally speaking, after the January meeting, remember Mr. Footy sent us a detailed report, and I just pulled it up. So, for example, it described in the report the number of slots typically accepted for rising ninth graders, and it pretty much corresponds with what they have there in terms of accepted. So I don't want to preempt your report, but I know at some point we'll get a more detailed update going back to what we talked about in the accountability system that provides much more demographic breakdown than what's being presented to us today.
And I would expect to be able to do that in September, and we would break it down by location for where the students are coming from as well. So for our middle schools, all of the elementary, what were those feeders? For the high schools, what were the middle school feeders? That would also include the private schools and home schools as well.
And that's important because, as you said, because acceptances are still occurring, it's a moving target right now.
What is the deadline date for the application? I know that's passed. I would just like to know.
The deadline for the applications is clearly passed. Even the deadline for, when we give out the offers and we ask parents to commit, that was in May. However, once they've committed, we still have to have them enrolled. So if they're coming out from a private, if they haven't enrolled yet, we're still holding that slot, and 99.9% of the time they will enroll. And so we'll have that hard number, but until I actually have the enrollment, I don't count them.
Reverend Haber was also asking, what was the deadline? Was it March or April for applications?
Oh, for applications, it was April, and then we went through the process of vetting in May, and at the end of May is when the offers went out.
Dr. Robson.
Why would we, if we offer the spot to, but they have not enrolled, why would we hold that, not offer to somebody else if they haven't enrolled?
We will always have that opportunity to offer it to someone else because we
Okay.
have that wait list.
Okay.
And so the goal is to get the very best candidates, and, you know, sometimes the timing isn't there. Like I said, you know, we're probably talking no more than 2 or 3 at a
Okay.
school.
Okay.
And so we have the wait list, you know, we do have the ability to go, and we've not had any problems filling those slots by day one.
So if Granby has, say, 65 slots, but only 59 accepted, does that mean 6 slots go unfilled?
It's not 59 accepted, it's 59 accepted and enrolled. And so we might be at the 65 for accepted, but I don't count them until they're enrolled. So that means that parent has to come in, they have to go through that enrollment process to make sure that they're in.
Well, that would be a good column to have. How many are enrolled in, when the time comes?
When we update it. we
Yeah.
will-
So in September, when I give it to you, it will be exactly that.
Perfect,
Enrolled.
good. Because if we're, I want to make sure we're filling the slots, and then,
Oh, there's.
Oh, yeah,
And then-
we're definitely filling.
okay, and then just,
The
There's,
slots will be filled.
okay,
And what you'll see then is that offered number might change a little
Sure.
bit because we've now pulled somebody off that wait list.
okay.
I think a key point in Dr. Robinson's original question, though, is, you know, I know later on, looking at the presentation, when you talk about equitable access and so forth, so the longer you hold a slot, then parents and children make other decisions, and then, you know, so I guess however that process works is,
And I'll address that just
Okay.
a little bit further
Okay.
on when we get into discussing what the committee is doing.
Oh.
But that is one of the talking points.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the current status then for middle schools. If you look at the next slide, young scholars, and I'm looking at the entry level, which is 6th grade. So for young scholars, there were 160 applications this year. There were 60 offered and 45 accepted. AOIS, 324 applications, 130 offers, 97 accepted. And so to kind of come back to your point about the caps, you know, we don't have necessarily a cap on the young scholars right now,
Okay.
but AOIS, we tend to stay at 100. And so that might fluctuate, you know, a student here or a student there by students moving in or out as well. Blair Pre-Med, we're at 81 right now. They normally take about up to 85. ADL at 3rd grade had 142 applied, 103 were offered based on the lottery, and then 92 have accepted to this point, and that is their cap going into this next year. ADL for 6th grade at the middle school level, 297. Again, those applications go through the lottery process. 79 were offered, and 57 have accepted, and that is their cap in addition to what is already rolling up from 5th grade. So their cap is 150 total for 6th grade at ADL. Southside STEM has 108 that have applied. Those are 108 choice applications, not zone applications. However, because they are at their cap, there are no choice slots available at this time. And then Ghent K-8 school, their entry point is kindergarten, 95 applied. Again, there's a lottery there as well, and offered 60 and 60 accepted.
Nobody missed that opportunity.
Good.
Ms. Basine?
So at this point in time, we don't have the information about how many private school, homeschool applicants we had and how many of them were offered, to share today.
I have the private school information with me right here. I don't have it as part of the PowerPoint, but I do have, you know, some of that information. What I don't have total is for the Norfolk Public Schools by elementary or by middle in terms of how many applications from each. But if you look at the high school programs for what would be a combination of private, homeschool, and from an application from just somebody from out of state or out of the zone, you know, I can share those numbers. We had 102 total applications But again, those are applications. It could be actually less number of students because they may have applied to more than one program as well.
Right.
46 of those 102 received offers, and 24 have accepted. And that's at the high school level.
That's cumulative.
That's high school.
Yeah, that's all high school.
Cumulative for all
Across all
five.
5 programs.
That's for all 5.
5.
I do have the breakdown if you want that by individual high school, but I'll certainly provide that in the full report in
But you can
September.
go ahead and share it now. That'll be, share what you have now, and that'll be helpful.
All right, so for Maury, it was 36 total applications, 13 offers with 5 accepted. Granby, with the IB program, had a total of 44 applications from private, homeschool, or outside, 19 offers with 12 accepting. Norview, 19 applications, 11 offers, 6 acceptances. Lake Taylor High School, 3 applications, 3 offers with 1 acceptance. And Booker T did not have any.
So,
Go ahead, Reverend Hayward. Oh, I'm sorry, were you on time?
Well, I was just going to ask you if you are, or the committee is at a point right now to talk about, especially, you know, for programs, well, any of the programs, but, you know, for Granby in particular, where we have the middle years IB program and the number of spots that are going to outside applicants.
Let me interject. This committee will be talking about our process. The educational planning piece will address whether or not will be a recommendation to the board regarding expansion of available seats at IB. You know, we've talked at length about what happens now that we also have a middle year program. Doesn't mean that every student who's in the middle years program at ADL would be interested in Granby, but our International Baccalaureate program has thrived all of these years without a middle years program, so we don't want to block other students from getting in, and people feel that the only way into IB is through the middle years program. So that's part of what we're talking about in the educational planning work also.
Yeah, and I'll ask, can we, to the extent the board wants to have conversations around policy or recommendations around weighting applications, that let's hold that to the end, and then we can talk about it once they get through.
And I believe I may address some of
Yeah,
that
okay.
as we go as well.
Gabriel?
How soon did we know that the Southside STEM Academy was going to be at their cap? Did we find that out after the applicants put forth applications, or doing?
We start the application process when we really do our specialty showcase night, which is in November. And so in November, do we really know how many we're going to have? No. But we certainly don't want to exclude from the
Right.
process. And so, you know, we collected the applications. We had hoped that there might be some choice seats available, but within the zone itself and with the caps that we've put in place,
Okay.
right now, that's just not feasible.
Do you
And
maintain
we do
a
have
wait
choice
list?
students that are rolling up, you know, and that are part of that 100 that'll be there.
I will also remind the board, last year when we gave a couple-year projection,
Right, I remember it was going to be.
it was
fall.
very clear that we may not have any space available.
That's okay,
That's
I
right.
just was. All right, thank you.
All right, moving on. As the board is well aware, the Young Scholars Program has been consolidated from Ruffner and Norview Middle and will now be housed at Rosemont Center. And so what we have done in terms of that transition to date, our teachers for the Young Scholars Program have been identified, and they have transitioned to the Rosemont site. All of their belongings and things have been moved. We've identified the additional elective positions to support both the AOIS and Young Scholars programs, so that our students from both programs will mix within some of their elective courses. We've provided an open house to incoming 6th grade held on June 14th, And those that were unable to attend have also received a welcome letter that included a frequently asked questions letter as well. Letters have been sent to the rising 7th and 8th grade students in June explaining the transition and again having those frequently asked questions. The 6th grade students will be, in just a couple of weeks, participating in the week-long transition program that we have in all of our middle schools, the week of August 14th through 17th. And then we will also have a Meet the Principal and Welcome to the New Location for the rising 7th and 8th grade students on August 17th as well. So by doing that, we believe we will have at least created the opportunity to touch every parent as part of that transition opportunity. Any questions in regard to the transition? We have had very few parent calls. The calls that we have had have been good questions that we've been able to answer. We believe it's going to be a very smooth transition.
Ms. Basine?
Have you had students from either of the locations opt to not continue in the program?
If there are, it must be small because I've not heard.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't, I
And
can't tell.
I
from the
haven't
numbers.
actually looked at the names to
Yeah, I
see,
just was
but
curious.
the number has gone up, so I suspect not.
Okay.
Dr. Robson?
You mentioned that the faculty for the Young Scholars Program has been identified. Were any of those from the previous faculty from the Young Scholars Program prior?
Yes.
From the original?
From the original?
From the two sites,
Yes.
were any of them from Norview and Ruffner? Yes.
How many, and
You will
How many
recall,
were
we
brought
made a
outside?
presentation to the board that we anticipated 4 to 6 positions that would be the academic positions, and we were going to convert a couple of positions into those resources, so to make sure we had AOIS already had its portion of art, music, PE, and those chorus, those things in place. So what did the influx of the additional students from Young Scholars mean? And so we added a couple of positions, 3 positions, to be sure that we had a robust set of electives available for students. Foreign language was also one of those.
I guess my question is, there was a couple of teachers that were in the Young Scholars Program at Ruffner that were transitioned out of Young Scholars and took positions at
At other places,
other
that's correct.
places.
And some of that was by their choice. Some of it also was through the process that we had to go through with human resources to determine, looking at certification, looking at eligibility, those kinds of things. Okay. So moving on then to the specialty program division review, which Dr. Rogers alluded to earlier. Based on the conversation that took place at the board meeting in January, we really knew that we had to grapple with a lot of work to look at. And we wanted to really take a broad look to begin with. And so we began with identifying our committee members, which you see listed at this time. And those were our committee members to begin the work. There'll be some changes going into this current school year as we've lost a couple of members, but we know we also need to add some members based on some of the preliminary work that we have done. Essentially, the goals of this committee are to generate recommendations for defining NPS specialty programs, and then to generate recommendations for enhancing the Norfolk Public Schools specialty programs. Those are the 2 overarching goals that we have. Based on that, as we came together as a committee, with such a large group of stakeholders involved, we began with a background on the Norfolk Public Schools specialty programs. We outlined each program as they currently existed. We reviewed the current status and the statistics of the program. Much of the same information that was shared with you in January was shared with this larger committee as well. We then reviewed previous program evaluations. That included the Hanover report and other data that ARA provided for us as well. From there, we went into a large group discussion of likes and wonders of the specialty programs. There are a lot of perceptions out in the community and within our own division in terms of what the specialty programs are. What is the intent of the programs? Different people had different thoughts around the intent, all good, but not as consistent as we would like to have. We then went into what should the specialty programs look like, and that was based on their own thoughts and ideas around what the group thought it should be. From there, we then needed to start breaking it down into the two goals. And the first one we wanted to tackle was, let's define ourselves. How do we define specialty programs? And much like the board grappled with that in January, this committee grappled with it as well. We have specialty schools, we have specialty programs, we have themed schools, and so does specialty really fit? And that is where it then led us into the discussion of magnet versus specialty. And so here's your first teaser in terms of a recommendation. It is beginning to look like the committee is going to recommend that we move away from the term specialty, and we have the overarching umbrella of magnet, and then specialty may come under the magnet topic. So as a result, we're now looking at giving ourselves a definition of what a magnet program or a magnet school would look like for Norfolk Public Schools. And that is in the draft process at this time. The other piece then was to look at comprehensively all of the programs that are existing within the division, and how do we take a look at them. And so based on going through that process of likes and wonders, going through what our ideas are, we narrowed it down and we identified we need to have 6 different subcommittees that can really focus in on the work. And so these subcommittees were identified as curriculum instruction, and this group will focus in on the instructional standards and the course offerings and the sequences. Equitable access, and that particular subcommittee will look at everything from transportation to city locations to geographic locations to access for all students to the programs. We have the admissions process, which will look at everything in terms of, is that a fair and equitable process for all students by school or by division? Should it be, where should it be managed from? What are the rubrics involved in the process, because we do have some, and any other requirements that we feel might be needed. Then we would have the Marketing, Recruitment, and Community Support Committee, and that group will look at the informed access through Norfolk, making sure that the facts are out there and it's not just perceptions or thoughts or ideas or rumor. We want to make sure that we're marketing it based on the facts, and making sure that we have our community support and our community relationship as well. And then monitoring, oversight, and division support, and that really just comes down to effective administration of the program. What resources will it take? And we know we've got some realignment of resources that will likely need to take place, and so that committee will look at that. And then the Innovation Committee, and that committee will look at what should be considered or could be considered either as an addition or a change or an enhancement. Also looking at different perspectives or different approaches than what currently exists, and what does the community want in terms of its input into our programs. And so it's very comprehensive in terms of looking at what these 6 committees will do. Our expectation is, moving to the timeline, we've done a fair amount of work in terms of building a base from January through June, but beginning in September of this next school year through January, our proposed goal is to meet monthly as a large committee, with each subcommittee meeting at least once between the larger group meetings, because each subcommittee will be sharing out on a monthly basis with the other committees as our work is interrelated. And so it is a very comprehensive approach, deliberate approach that we're trying to take to look at all of our programs and all of our schools, whether they're theme schools, lottery schools, or specialty programs. Questions?
That's great.
Reverend Haywood?
Yeah. So I just would like to understand how the current admission processes how is it formulated? Does it look at the student's academic standing and interview? Does that also include testing?
For some. And so each program has, its own iteration of a process. We've tried to create some consistency and commonality with it, and so we've done that through a common application. But then from the application, for example, Granby High School, because it's part of the IB program, they do have an interview process. Norview, the Center for Leadership and Engineering, they don't have an interview process, but they do have an exam, a math exam that's involved, that ties into that engineering program. Mm-hmm. And then we do have a rubric that we apply for the full application with those components embedded in. So it does vary slightly from program to program. And so that'll be something else that, the subcommittees will be looking at in terms of process.
I have just one other question. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, and that's a critically important piece, particularly as we think about the board's equity policy and making sure inadvertently over time biases have not entered into the process that will preclude students from fully accessing what's available to them. And so that's why, the process that this team is taken is very critically important. And it gets back to that thing of, as Dr. Rogers was saying, we could have checked off and done some things, but we're trying to fix this for the long haul and to be able to address and make recommendations to the board that will sustain these programs, help them grow and fully thrive where they are, and it won't be any mixed messages around access to them.
I just have one last question, and this is in the area of innovation or thinking out of the box. When you look at Booker T, you only have 40 applications there. And that's a very low number in comparison to what you see in the other specialty programs. Has there been any, at Booker T, Booker T is just a half a block away from Norfolk State, and there are our partners in education here. Has there been any thought to create programs that would allow students from Norfolk Public Schools to have concurrent courses with Norfolk State through a Booker T program like that, which would then attract a number of people to that program over there?
Let me take the first part of that, and so let me do the historical context, and I'll ask Mr. Coleman our current reality. Mm-hmm. That was exactly how the arts program was built. And just like many programs within Norfolk Public Schools, when the champions have left the table, the work wasn't sustained. And so we know you've heard me say this before, within the arts program at Booker T, there were a couple of real key champions who have moved on. Similarly, the folks from Norfolk State who were at the table when we were championing this program have too moved on. And so we've lost that momentum through transition. But I know Mr. Coleman, in working with Dr. Stallings, and where they are trying to revisit what their focus will be.
And we've had numbers of discussions, both at the school level as well as combination with the division. Some of it comes down to available resources. Some of it comes down to having the people to be able to be in a position to do that work. Some of it is just stepping out and trying to reach out to make those connections. I would not say that we've done as much as we could or should be doing in that area. However, that has been something that has already been part of the discussions with our larger committee, and I expect it'll go deeper when we get into the subcommittee level in September. We've not only talked about Norfolk State, but we've talked about our relationship right next door with the Attic Theater and some of the other different organizations within the community. So we know that there's opportunity out there. We just have to find the resources and the people and make those connections work.
And so I was speaking of not just the fine arts program, although I have an affinity for fine arts, but Norfolk State has a cybersecurity department that's growing. And
well,
I
and
would
so
suspect,
to your point of innovation,
Right.
Those kinds of things would come out through that innovation committee. Now, whether it's located at Booker T or some other location, that remains to be seen. But yes, all of those things we hope will be out on the table and be a part of that discussion.
And Booker T, deciding as a faculty, where do they want to be in terms of that work? Is that where they want to be with the arts, or would they have a different focus?
Thank you.
Ms. Basine?
Um,
Oh, yeah, oh, okay. Anyway, so, there's a couple of things. I know you mentioned the transportation piece, and I know that's something that, has come up about the, program at Blair. So I know you all look at that. And then, for the life of me, every time we talk about Academy for Discovery at Lakewood, I feel like I'm confused about the program. So I know that when you were going through the numbers, there's at least currently 2 entry paths. There's a 3rd grade path and a 6th grade path.
Right.
So does that continue as because it seems to me, I'm just confused about
Well, and
how that piece works. Would that be something that will come out of this work?
we talked about this in January. One of my big concerns with the way in which we've done K-8 schools and 3-8 schools is not treat them as though they are one continuous school. But we even have done some staffing things different for 6-8 versus the K-5. And so you either got to say, this is a K-8 school and we do it here, and this is how you get there, and not necessarily have these breaks. I am concerned about, again, 2 onboarding years at ADL, both 3rd and 6th, because I think, again, the power of a school like that is that you begin somewhere and you continue. This group, this committee will certainly look at that, but, and the team knows, I continue to be concerned when we establish. We shouldn't call it a K-8 if it's a K-5 and a 6-8 school in the same building. It's either an elementary, middle share in the same building, or it's a K-8 school that addresses middle school age students and elementary school students, and it's one continuum. And so that is something we've got to make a decision about.
Well, and I guess that segues to where I was going, whether the Educational Planning Committee is going to make some recommendations or whether we have to have some conversations at the board level. It just seems to me that both in terms of the example of the 2 entry points, the conversations that we've had about, I guess, both in terms of equitable access, but also in terms of trying to have proudly diverse schools, which includes economic diversity and geographic diversity to the extent that it makes sense, that the market responds that way. I think where Ms. Basine was going earlier, we've had some conversations around whether or not we should have any weighting in our lottery processes for whatever reason. It just seems to me that if the committee is operating on this schedule, that maybe from a board perspective, we need to provide some framework or guidance to the committee around these issues, if that makes sense.
Well, we've kind of taken the framework and guidance from the January meeting.
Right.
Because these are existing programs that we're looking to continue, they really won't fall within the scope of what we're doing with the educational planning piece. ADL has stood up. That's more about a philosophy and a district policy of how we begin to address that. And so I think it's in the right place for the committee to deal with that. You can certainly expect, if there are recommendations that come from the educational planning work, we will be specific in how we feel those should be operationalized, because I think some of this was left open-ended, in terms of the onboarding years, whether or not there'd be choice seats, and they weren't well defined. That's one of our goals with the educational planning work, is to make sure we're fully defining what it would look like, how you would access it, and how you would get there, so that we don't have some of the confusion around this. A perfect example is the Blair Specialty Program for health and engineering. In its original designation was not viewed to be a district-wide program, and that becomes that transportation issue. Again, educational planning is not the issue with that. That's about what's going to be our policy. Will we find the money to invest in the transportation for the Blair program going forward? And so this group can help us with that.
Right, but I guess that's where I am. I'm saying that if there are some board level guidance decisions that need to be made as the committee works, then it just seems to me we need, if that's the case, we need to schedule it so that we can.
Well, I would say let them continue the work, and as they develop a parking lot of issues that they feel may need board input, and we can do that. The challenge in bringing some of this before we have some recommendations is that we get all over the place. We get that spider diagram. And so we need to be able to manage the process, but yet say to the board, even as we come with, if we do an interim report and we do a final report, we say, these are some pending questions and we need you to help us think through those.
Let me give you another example of what comes to mind for me. So we're in the process of looking at discipline, disproportionality, restorative justice. So we look at information and we may find that there's some challenges that we have around how we handle discipline, just using that. Then a student who's in the current system gets caught up in the discipline because we've set some policy around cell phones or something. Then the student wants to apply to a specialty program. And then the specialty program looks at the discipline record. So somehow I'm saying we have to be able to look at how these things.
Right, so that's at the next level. We've got to clean up what it is, how you access. And then, as part of the access, if we find examples of exactly what you're saying, then how do we address the potential barriers to that? Or what's the weight in terms of discipline and certain things in there? Exactly right. Because if that was the case, because I was suspended 3 times in the same week at 5th grade, I wouldn't be eligible for some 6th grade specialty programs. So I hear what you're saying.
Dr. Robinson.
Depends what you're suspended for.
Well, it may have
Well,
been.
but
You were
that-
eligible.
Anyway.
Challenging
point.
the
But
adults, having an opinion.
And what I'm saying, and what I agree with Dr. Boone, that we should let the committee do their work, make presentation, and then that would be my.
And just to be
recommendation.
clear, I wasn't suggesting that the committee stop its work.
Right,
No.
right.
I'm just saying that as we are doing our work, I just think, I want to make sure that there is some level of connection and communication between the issues that we're talking about. Because even as you were, I think, half joking, perhaps about it depends upon what you were suspended for. Well, like I said, I was just in this conference all day yesterday, and they talked about, and at the classrooms, not courtrooms, defiance. So depending upon how the current culture and expectations are, we could suspend somebody for just about anything. But the fact that that occurs then has potential impact on that student to be able to access something when we know we're still in the process of trying to deal with biases and all this other kind of thing. So I just think that as that work continues, and I think it's great work that they're doing, we need to be mindful of the goals and expectations that we set, and at some point over time, where you get this intersection between the changes that we're making on one path and what we're communicating to the administration on another path, so that ultimately, wherever nirvana is, that we reach there. If that's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years out, we just still need to be able to follow that path. So.
And I think that'll come in once they figure it out, what our policies will then be around, the process. But to back to, you know, the two entry points at ADL, what recommendations that did IB have when they did their evaluation in the spring? Didn't they?
The only recommendation that they had dealt with originally, the middle years program was going to be an academy within ADL.
Mhm.
And that's when we were told early on last year that it would have to be a full, all grades 6 through 8 would have to be included.
Right.
And so I don't recall any specific recommendation that they made in terms of entry points, because I think the uniqueness is you have through grades 3 through 5 in a lot of ways. If the rigor and interest is evolving and emerging through that, and they continue to be able to roll into the middle years program, that could be an opportunity.
Yeah, I was just recalling because I was part of the
Yeah.
meeting that we had when they were visiting, and I know, you know, they were saying in an ideal world, you know, they would have those K-8 IB programs, and whether we consider or think about what that might look like there if the idea is, as you said, to keep, you know, that one entry point and you stay through 8th grade and not have that.
Well, and I think then we get to the point that Mr. Jordan was saying, then are we putting another layer of access to the school at a third grader, as a third grader, that because of the middle years program? And so I promise it's the last time I'm gonna say it for a while. All of this should have been ironed out before we started the school, but we're gonna try to figure it out. I mean, that's not sleight of hand or shade, but these are the types of details that you spend time with before you roll out something, such that we're ready to answer those questions, or we've thought about it. And that's why I said the work with the specialty schools and programs now is outside of what's going on, but there's certainly lessons learned from our specialty programs that we're using as we think through the educational planning recommendations for the fall.
Well, for me, that's one of the reasons why I was going back to the beginning, because the dual entry points, I think, at one time was being tied to the idea that we were going to have early years elementary school program at another site that was going to help feed a pool that would then, you know, I'm not saying whether it was right or wrong, but that was part of the concept behind it. And then the project-based learning was something that was there as well. So I'm just saying that, and I also raise it in the context of, you know, if you go back and look at this Housing Authority city agreement around St. Paul's, they had in the agreement that there was going to be a school in the St. Paul's area, and they defined it as STEM and project-based learning. So, and there was no discussion that I know of with the school system about it. So I just think we have to be clear on our opportunities and pathways so that everybody else is clear on the opportunities and pathways and what makes sense based upon the expertise that you all are doing in your committee work. I just don't want it to be a train wreck at the end, and that's all. I'm trying to make sure that from a board perspective, that whatever you need from us around clarity, that we offer it as soon as we can in the process, and not your committee does all this work and then we unintentionally, you know, pull the rug out from under you because of something that we did.
Yeah.
That was my point.
We certainly will do that.
We won't let that happen.
Thank you, appreciate that.
We don't like train wrecks.
Anything else then on the specialty program update?
No, I thought this was a great presentation. The timeline seems very reasonable, very methodical, data-driven. So thank you. I think it looks great.
So I know in your timeline you have the February 2018. Of course, this past year we had our kind of like January retreat format. Can you all just look at if we're going to end up doing something like a all-day type thing in January, if it makes sense? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Jordan, and we've had good conversation with about this work, and you know, to John's credit, he's done a phenomenal job with the group. It's hard for me to remove myself from it, but he's done a fantastic job with it. And one of the things that I did learn with regards to doing this work is that it's got to be slow and steady when we can't rush it, because the specialty programs have huge implications on the rest of our work and outcomes and attracting people. We want it done well. So the timeline here is proposed, and it's proposed for a reason. And some of the work that's going to come out as a result of the group is going to be driven by the committee. So we set a timeline, a goal there of having February. I think it's aggressive, and John and I have talked about it quite a bit because stuff gets in the way with that. So I don't want us to be disappointed if the group is not ready to make full recommendations across all committees if we're not able to
Just to
meet that.
clarify my own communication, all I was simply trying to say is that if the board is going to have an extended retreat or extended meeting, and if you are going to come back with some things that required extended time of the board, just consider that
We will.
calendar in your schedule.
Right.
That's all.
We would do that. I anticipate the educational planning piece will be our point of great extension
Okay.
in terms of time and what's needed for that. So
As we
we're going to
agenda
look
plan,
at
we'll look at
how
it.
we build this into regular work sessions perhaps, but the educational planning work, once we roll the recommendations to the board, we'll have a lot of time involved.
I would expect if we don't have the full recommendations, we'll certainly be able to update you on the recommendations that we would have at that point.
All right.
And there are some things too, there are budgetary implications.
Right.
What are the ones that are budget? What are the things that are policy and pieces that we can shift? For example, addressing the admissions criteria, those are things that are kind of cost neutral and could occur even if we haven't finished all of the other work. So there's some of that can go on also.
And that was the driver for that February timeline because of the budgetary implications, potentially.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that
That's
the
me.
will of the board is we're going to be dealing with budget discussion September. So I just want y'all to be.
Oh, no, we're already 4 months ahead of you.
I know. I'm just just
A
for
year and 4 months, actually.
clarification. All right. Anything else for Mr. Coleman? Likewise, thank you and your team for all the work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Let's see. Are we done?
Yep.
So I resent to you all. I understand that some of you were unable to open the spreadsheet with the educational facility. I keep saying facility. Educational planning committee members. If you get a chance to look at it, it has most of the recommendations that you all submitted. I'd just like to get the board's consent to at least just send it to Dr. Boone and allow her to reach out to those individuals, see who's available, who's interested, let them talk about what the requirements are, get them to fill out the advisory committee paperwork and just move.
Yes.
And if we find that there are gaps we need to fill for whatever reason, then Dr. Boone can come back to us and say, I need the board to recommend additional X, Y, Z, and then we can respond, but not hold up the process any further. Is everybody comfortable with that?
And if I can, again, piggyback on that sense of urgency, Tracy Richter is ready to go, and we didn't want a partial committee starting, so we needed a community representative, so.
Yeah, let's move
I
on.
support that.
Let's move on.
And if you all need any additional, telephone numbers, emails, or anything, because I didn't add all that in that spreadsheet, but the board members sent that, so I can get all that info to you if you need any of that, but please proceed and,
Yeah, but we'll make sure.
and
Okay.
we can move forward from there. All right, anything else, for now in our, open session? Okay, hearing none, then, what we'll do is, have a motion to go into closed session, and, we'll do that and then close out this meeting. So is there a motion for us to enter into closed executive session?
Mr. Jordan, I move that we enter into closed executive session.
I have a second.
I second that motion.
Ms. Banks, if you would proceed.
It has been moved that the school board, superintendent, and council go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for the discussion or consideration of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of the Norfolk Public Schools, including consideration of the personnel docket of this date. Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Reverend Haywood?
Aye.
Dr. Robinson?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye. All right, so we'll consider our work session adjourned, and we will convene for our closed session at 6:15. And just lastly, want to thank the administration and the team and everyone for all the hard work, the excellent presentations. It feels like we're in a very good groove, and so we just look forward to continuing it throughout August and into September. So we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. We appreciate it.